There we go. Welcome, everyone. Marci Mearns here. I'm happy to have you all along for an exploration into Massimo's new Suggesta 2.0 repertory. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, but since we're a small group, is there anyone here who already has this repertory? You've been using the older version or have the new one? Patricia,
I just got the new one a few days ago.
you got the updated one, so you've had the
Yes.
older.
I've had the
Excellent.
older one, which I use along with other repertories, but yeah, anyway, now I've got the update.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I have the update as well. And I had not given it the attention that, frankly, I think it deserves
Mm.
now that I have taken the time to really dig into it. So I'm excited to just share what I've discovered and what Massimo has shared that I've tried to put together for you. The
May
way
I
I
ask a
like to do
question?
these,
May
yeah,
I ask a question to the
please
group?
do.
How
Yeah.
many people have actually studied with him?
Oh, I have no idea.
I mean, in this
Oh,
group.
in this group.
I have,
Yeah, so I assuming that's one of the reasons you were taken right away to the repertory.
yes.
His new repertory as you had a relationship with him already. Yeah,
Well,
makes sense. I've never taken a workshop with him, but I certainly heard good things about him.
okay.
I have actually gone to many years ago a really great long weekend seminar on the Asteraceae, and and then obviously seen lectures and so on and so forth. So we'll talk a bit about that. But yeah, with that being said, let me just say that if you have a question or a comment, feel free to unmute yourself and or put something in the chat. Okay? And we'll stop periodically and answer whatever questions you may have. And with that being said, let me share my screen. And yeah, can you all see what we have on the screen here today? Just somebody let me know you can see my screen with the welcome. Yeah?
Yeah, I see it. It's great.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So again, Marci Mearns here. Happy to welcome you to a presentation this afternoon on Massimo's Suggesta 2.0, the new version of Massimo's repertory. And for those who are not familiar with Massimo, he is a homeopathic medical doctor in Italy. Massimo was born in Naples in 1958. He graduated as a medical doctor and chose to devote himself entirely to classical homeopathic medicine. So he's been practicing for 40 years, since 1985. In 1991, he began teaching mainly abroad, and since then, he's divided his time between working as a doctor and teaching homeopathic medicine. I will add that Massimo's repertory and database work really began in the 1990s. I first became familiar with his work when he was working with David Workington and bringing his data base online with what at that time was Mech Repertory and Reference Works. So, if you're not familiar with Massimo and you would like to access his website, let me say this, which I forgot to mention, is I always take these notes and put them into a PDF for you, which you can get a copy of from our um, customer service desk from orders at Radar Opus. So then you can have these links if you want. So you can go visit Massimo's website. You can also probably find it online. And not only is he, he's a very prolific author, let me say that. And so here's just a small listing of his publications, which you may be interested in. I think you'll find that, for example, the spider remedies, he has done a lot of work on those. We know he's done work on arnica and similar remedies, um, lots of families of remedies. Um, all of these publications are available, and much of this work will find reflected in the clinical confirmations and additions in this suggestive repertory. Okay. I also want to point out that there are a whole bunch of clinical cases that are freely available on Massimo's website. Now, these are in Italian, but we all know how to get things translated these days. So if you want to take a look at some of his cases, get familiar with how he thinks and works, those things are available to you. Today, we're going to focus on Suggesta. And I want to acknowledge that you'll see in this screenshot, Suggesta has its own webpage apart from Massimo. Again, there's a link here. And on this webpage, there are 3 short videos. You'll see them down here at the bottom listed. Most of what I'm going to present today comes directly from watching those videos and then digging into the software or the repertory itself, if you will. There is other information online, obviously available. But, if you really want to dig in, you can watch Massimo himself talk about some of these things in those videos. Okay, so again, the latest version of Massimo is the repertory is the Suggesta 2.0, and it just came out this year. So for those who are not familiar, it is a revision of our classical repertory, and it revisits and redefines the repertory in a modern clinical way. Now, according to Massimo, Suggesta is not intended to replace the classical repertory. So you're going to use this in combination with, for example, synthesis Adonis in your case repertorizations. It's designed to accompany and enrich our classical repertories. And according to Massimo, it offers a consciously biased perspective on Massimo's clinical vision. I think I'm going to talk about that in a bit. It might even be right here. So according to Massimo, Suggesta is deliberately named. It's a suggester, all right, built on the framework of Massimo's own clinical editions. And we're going to go over this a couple times anyway. You'll probably hear it ad nauseum. Massimo has studied, as we said, since the early 90s, since the beginning of his practice, clinical prescriptions that he himself has been successful with. So the clinical editions are the homeopathic symptoms that are common to several clinical cases. That would be 4 to 5 per remedy with long follow-ups, 4 to 5 years. And in those cases where the remedy has given good results in both acute and chronic or long-lasting systemic responses. Okay, so the additions, the remedy suggestions that are included in this repertory are very heavily clinically verified. Okay, again, Suggesta because it gives suggestions. Now, if you're interested, there is also an interview that was done on Like Treats Like podcast, and I took a few liberties from Massimo's interview there as well. And what he says about the repertory in general is that it's a book. It has mistakes, and that we must remember the truth is always with the patient. So Massimo's aim of this repertory is precision. And he talks in this interview about where are we in the world of today's repertories. According to Massimo, today's repertories are redundant in data. They've got excessive data, and they're very poor in focused information. At the time of Kent and Hahnemann, it was desirable to have more and more information. Now we have the problem of too much data, too much data, which doesn't necessarily translate to usable information. And so Massimo actually asked the question, is it our future to do more and more provings? How can we best use the information we already have? Okay, again, strict guidelines for the clinical editions. The cases there'll be at least 4 to 5 cases of the remedy with 4 to 5 years of good results using that remedy in both chronic and acute conditions in the same patient. For clinical work, what he has attempted to do is shrink the extensive data to the most meaningful information, which can help us to make a differential diagnosis. Okay. Now, I have more information about Massimo's clinical approach. I am actually going to take this slide and I'm going to move it because I think I'm doing too much talking and we want to look at actual repertories, right? We can come back to the rest of that. So let's talk about what makes Suggesta unique and Suggesta 2.0 in particular. So if you have the old version, you'll note that some of the chapter headings were actually in Latin. That's no longer the case. It's all now in English. So I've really focused in two different ways that Suggesta is a unique and useful tool. First of all, in the structure and organization of the book itself. There's a simplified chapter structure or sections, as he calls them, and there are new sections. So let's take a look. First of all, here's a sample of the new kinds of chapters. And you'll see immediately, I would think, how very useful this can be. Here's the chapter, gastrointestinal. Logical, right? Especially, when you're a beginning homeopathy student, we don't know where to look in the abdomen. Is it in the stomach? Well, Massimo is taking care of that for us by creating this macro section or macro chapter, for example, called gastrointestinal, which includes the abdomen, the rectum, and the stomach. Makes sense, right? GI, including abdomen, rectum, and stomach. Okay. Other of these macro sections or chapters that you may find useful. Here's thorax, which includes the chest. The cough section is there. The heart and circulation is there. The lungs, the bronchia, and so on, and respiration. So all of those separate chapters that we're used to in, for example, our synthesis repertory are all now combined in one macro section of this new repertory. And finally, here's another example of one of these macro sections, which is the throat chapter. So let's go ahead and just take a look at some of these in the actual repertory, since that's what we're here for, right? Okay. Now I need to tidy up my desktop here a little bit. Okay. So now if I said I'd review a few things. When we click this big red repertories icon in the upper left-hand corner, we're going to get our table of contents for all of the repertories that we have. And you'll notice that I have Massimo's repertory here set in my favorites at the top so that it always comes right up to the top of my table of contents. The other nice thing about setting some favorites is that when you go to do a search of any kind, I'll just pop up an advanced search, which is what I like to do. You can specify right up here that you want to search just in your favorites. And that eliminates a lot of the extra search results that you we probably don't want. So anyway, here's Massimo's Suggesta 2.0. And you'll remember if I click on one of these triangles, it opens up the table of contents. And let's just go and take a look. This shows you really quickly the number of chapters that we have. We didn't look at urinary. Let's look at that and see what's included. Now, it opens to urinary when I click on the chapter name, right? If I want to see let's call it the subrubrics of urinary, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on the binoculars here to open. That's not what I want to do. There we go. There's the urinary, and I'll show you in a minute how I did that. But in the urinary chapter, then we have the bladder, the kidneys, and the urethra. It's all there in one Mondo chapter. So you get the idea behind that. It's a little bit different kind of an organization, but I think especially for those of us, if we don't know where to look, this is going to be extremely useful. And, it's clinically relevant. Okay, so the macro sections, that's one. And then we have what I was calling, or what I'm calling here, subsections, broken down into the organ itself, the organ illness, and the organ pain. In this case, I gave you a screenshot here of head illness, and head pain. Same thing you'll notice in that GI section. Abdomen is actually broken down into 3 sections, as are rectum and stomach. And finally, same thing with nose. Now, nose has also got smell in there, and we don't have smell illness and smell pain. We just have smell. But we do have those 3 different sub-rubrics, giant sub-rubrics, if you will, for the nose. So let's take a look here. And again, it's really quick and easy to do. Let's just look at the nose one. Okay, now what I'm doing, well, I'm going to show you in just a moment. If I want to look at the main rubrics in the nose section, again, I can go to nose illness, and that's going to give me the clinical presentations, if you will. Inflammation, for example, inflammation in the nose, and here I am. Okay, lots of cross references in this particular book. But again, it's very convenient to see. Let's look at skin. I didn't really look at this one so terribly much, but yeah, skin illness, and skin pain. So things are broken down in a really logical way for you. Just interrupt me at any point if you have a question. Now, let's get on to beyond this structure of the Mondo chapters and the subsections. We have new chapters. And this is one of the things that I think is really, really exciting about this repertory. So let's take a look at one of those. It's this one that's called Age. Okay. And you'll notice here that I actually took a little breakdown, but we're going to get into this and take a look at some depth. How about this climacteric, the menopause? Let's go have a look here. So we can go to age. It's actually the last chapter in this repertory. And these are the various sections. You'll notice right away we have something called andropause. That's part of our modern language now, right? Climacteric, and I want to show you the way this works. I love this thing because when I go into the climacteric or the menopausal postmenopause, I should say, section of Suggesta, I now have symptoms that are particular to that age or that phase. So, for example, if I go, let's look at mind, ailments from climacteric is right there. If I want to go back, I could look at extremities. And look at this. Already, you see the same organization is here. If I had a case of a menopausal woman with extremity pain, I might actually go and take a look here. The localization, that's another feature. And I might have gouty joints. Again, remember that these are clinically confirmed, we might call them additions or prescriptions that Massimo has run through his system, right? So really, really useful, this whole notion of the ages. And with each age, we're going to have something very different. I took a look, for example, at children, and I've got a different set of subrubrics for children. I have a different set of subrubrics for babies. Okay? So that's a whole new and useful section, new chapter. There's another new one. Oh, I was looking at this adult one too. Let's just have a peek at that. So we're looking at age, adult, because I was curious, what is this? Let's go back to the age of adults. And we have mind rubrics. I thought that's odd. What are we talking about here? Well, this is what we have. Prematurely adult. Really useful rubric, isn't it? If we have a youngster who is exhibiting or presenting as prematurely adult. And of course, carcinosin would be one of the main remedies that we would think about in that regard. But there are others that have come into play in Massimo's practice. Okay? So that age chapter, being brand new, is really, really useful. I'm going to slide these. Sorry, I'm playing with my slides here. Let's take a look at one more of the new chapters. This is one called Elimination. And look how handy this is. He's actually done us the favor of combining all of the different, if you might say, discharge routes that are available to the human organism and put them in one of these Mondo chapters entitled Elimination. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing just how useful this can be in terms of, I know exactly where I want to go. It's an issue with elimination. So if, for example, I put in expectoration, here I have all of my expectoration rubrics, if you will. And within that, well, you'll see in a moment, we have something called concomitants. There are some consistent subheadings that are also included, like concomitants will always be there. I shouldn't say always, but in many, many of our chapters, we're going to have concomitants. We may have location. We don't have location on this one, but there are some consistent themes that run through, and we'll look at those in a moment. Okay, so those are just a couple of the most important new chapters. Let me look and see if there's anything else that
Can
we...
I ask a question here?
Yeah, please.
I was doing the little hand up thing, but I don't think that works.
Oh, I don't... Yeah, just go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead. So we saw under adult mind, we saw mind several other places in the age thing as an example. So that means that any of those rubrics that we would have found in a different repertory that would have been under mind, does that mean those are not there anymore? And we have to know which section to look into them?
You're referring to, are you saying, let me see if I'm understanding your question. You're wondering if these...
So if I just went to the mind section, would I find those same rubrics?
Well, gee, I don't know. Let's have a look, shall we? You're asking if they're duplicated in another area or
Yeah,
in
because
that part
I
of the
can't
repertoire.
imagine I wouldn't have thought of it wouldn't have been automatic for me to think age if I'm thinking about a premature,
Fair enough. So
young
we're
adult kind
talking
of thing.
about prematurely adult. Okay, so now I'm going to give you guys a window into how I do my how I figure things out. This says premature and adult, right? If you've ever been to any of my presentations, you know how much I love the advanced search. I'm going to go to the word premature. Okay. And I'm actually going to search in open repertories only because that's all I'm really interested. Let's go look for the word premature and see where it comes, shall we? Best way to do it is right here, and we'll be able to answer that question for ourselves. Okay, so in Suggesta 2.0, which is the version that we're looking at, you see this here on the left, results of search, we have in the mind, adult, this is the prematurely adult. That's the one we were just looking at.
It looks like the same symptoms.
Well,
Same rubric.
is that symptom. If I double click here, it's going to open to that symptom.
Yeah,
Let's
but
go
it's
back
in
to
the mind room. It's in the mind chapter.
It's in the mind. Yes, but it's in, hold on. So it is. Okay. So you're right. It has been duplicated. Let's go down. We've only got, how many results do we have here? 41. And remember that the results of search that you get here are going to be in chapter order. So given that age is the last chapter, comes after generalities. Yes, here it is. And this one has 16. So this is this one. And let's go look at the other one. Make sure that we're not losing our marbles here. Yes, it is the same rubric. Great question. And you see how easy, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know how to use the the searching tool. And we may well find, let's go down to the age. Well, here we have premature dentition. So all of the dentition rubrics, now you've really got me going on something, because I want to know about dentition. And I want to know where dentition appears in Suggesta. Okay, so of course we have mind symptoms around dentition, but let's see where dentition falls within the age. Children, teeth, dentition difficult. Okay, great questions, right? So it looks like there is duplication here. Which,
So as long as you don't, you're not paying attention, if you weren't paying attention, you could take it in two places, and then,
yeah,
or maybe it's more places, I don't know, and end up skewing your analysis.
well, you're not going to skew your analysis because you're going to carefully assess every rubric that you decide to keep after you throw them all on the
That's
flip.
exactly what you should be doing. But I've gone back in case I was working on, and I end up finding in different clipboards the same rubric.
Refine, refine, refine. You won't do that twice or three
And
times.
so there's no way that the system doesn't recognize that. I mean, so it'd have to be us, right? Okay.
No. And if I may, I'm glad that the system will allow us to duplicate. I would rather the system not try and outsmart me. This is a tool for us to use in an active manner. Yeah. And I think you probably notice pretty quickly if you've duplicated rubrics. Certainly that's something that we always want to work on when we are actually trying to model a case by repertorizing and doing an analysis. But that's a great question, and thank you for that, because I think we all learned something. And you know, like I said, this is my favorite tool to answer questions, right? We just go in there and pop it in and see what we get. So great question. Before we go on to my little how-to section, yeah, I'm going to leave this. I know I keep pushing Massimo's clinical perspectives down the pike. Let's take a look at this how-to review, because this is super important. If you do not have your cross references turned on, or for some reason they go away, it's especially important with repertories like this one, because it is so rich in cross references. Okay, really even more so than the number of cross references that we have in Adonis. So you want to make sure these are what I'm referring to when I say cross references. So for example, affectation would cross reference in many different ways, and you can use these hyperlinks to go visit those referenced rubrics. For example, Mind Haughty would take us here, and look at the number of cross references. We do not want to miss out on those. So I'm going to draw your attention to the upper right hand corner of my screen here, where I have some buttons. And if you're not familiar, again, this is just to review for you. This button right here that's supposed to be tags, luggage tag looking, if I click that, you notice that my cross references went away. They're not there. That's an on-off switch. If I turn it back on, there are my cross references. I'll just point out to you that I can do the same thing with the remedies display. Just by clicking on this pill bottle, I can actually remove the listing of remedies. I could actually remove the cross references and the remedies, and I have a very stark skeletal view of my repertory. So if you find things aren't to your liking, or you're missing something you think should be there, try turning on your cross references. Now, the second issue that can happen with your cross references, and I have seen this happen, is that you may not have cross references as part of your tags. So if that's the case, there's a little arrow here indicating more information, which says select which tags to show and hide. If I take that, it's going to allow me to select which tags I want. Tag tree parameters, and the cross references are all the way down at the bottom. Hyperlinks, you see here are the cross references. So I can either turn on or turn off all the hyperlinks, or I can select the ones I want. So this is an area that you may want to play with in your program, particularly if you find that something's missing. I have the veterinary rubrics, for example, the markings for veterinary turned on. If I don't want that, I can just uncheck that box. Okay. So those are the tags that are associated with this luggage tag thing here. Okay. So that is the show cross references up here in the upper right. And I think I, gave you some more information about all of that. There are the cross references. The other one I really want to go over for you is how to open the navigation window. What do I mean by the navigation? Most of you are probably doing this because I think most of us here are seasoned users of the software. And I always caution people, if you don't know where you're going or you don't know what you're looking for, you're better off to do a search like I did here because I didn't know exactly where to go. But when I'm in my repertory and I know exactly where I want to go, if you recall, you can simply start typing. So if I want a symptom in the mind chapter, I could start typing MIN. And as soon as I start typing, you'll notice that my navigation window shows up, right? And because I typed MIN, mind is highlighted. And because go to down here is got the green tick, if I just hit the enter key, I will go now into the mind chapter with all of the sub-rubrics, or the rubrics, I should say, the first line rubrics in that chapter in alphabetical order. Okay, so there's great value to knowing how to get into the navigation window. And if I use the escape key in the upper left, it goes away. Now, the one that I use a lot is actually, okay, what happens? If I click on the binoculars to open the navigation window, it opens to the very top of the book. Okay, I'm going to close that. I have the little hand here pointing at Haughty. If I use the function F3 key on my keyboard, you'll notice that the navigation window opens to that exact point. Pardon me, and I can navigate from here. Okay, you see the difference there? If I, again, it's the function F3 key on my Mac keyboard that allows me to open wherever I am. If I'm pointing at, now I'm at the rubric heedless, careless. If I press F3, my navigation window will open right there. And then I can just use delete and I'm right back into the main navigation for the mind chapter. So this is really, really useful. This is what I was doing. Let's say over here on age, the hand is pointing to age. If I want to see what's on the navigation window, I don't want to press that binocular. I want to use my function F3 and it opens that little window and then I can begin navigating. Okay. Yeah, so to open the nav.
Is that also true on the Windows?
Yes, it should be true if you have your function keys set to work as function keys. That is your key to success. There is a setting, I use a Mac, and there is a setting on my Macintosh to somehow or another use the function keys, the, F1, F2, and so on, for another purpose. So you may, if it doesn't work for you when you press the F3, you may need to go into your computer keyboard settings and make sure that the function keys are set to work as function keys. And again, the F3 will open the navigation window to wherever precise spot you are. Okay? So that's kind of a hot tip for you. You can also at any point use the function F2 key and it opens the chapter one. Okay, so again, you can do all this by typing. It really will save a lot of time when you know where you are. Okay, so we have arrived at this little bit of information that I tried to pull together for you from Massimo's discussion. This particular part came from his introduction to his upcoming 5-volume Materia Medica series. He's working on a series of Materia Medica of the polycrests. So just to give us an idea of what are we looking at and what are we talking about when we talk about clinical prescriptions, and similima, and so on. According to Massimo, my reference model of homeopathic medicine seeks a so-called constitutional remedy, the one that most closely approximates the way the patient functions as a whole. The patient functions as a whole over a broad time frame. This is my emphasis, as a whole. So we're talking about a whole patient prescription. This concept, Massimo's concept of simillimum, is very different from the so-called onion model, or those concerned with the patient's current state at that moment. You know, we have layers, we have all sorts of other approaches. But bear in mind that this is the point of view with which Massimo has created this clinical repertory for us. He further goes on to say, in most cases, what is described, imagined, recounted, or taught about polycrests does not go beyond a kind of large container or umbrella, which paints a very general picture of how we function. It's a sort of a caricature, a homeopathic stereotype, which certainly stimulates the resilience of a system. So I would think about, I was working with someone today who said, well, the person's not a sulfur type. I had to ask, well, what do you mean by a sulfur type? Because we've read these constitutional pictures and we sort of have an idea, that they're scruffy and they don't wash and they put their feet up on the desk. This is, I believe, what he's referring to when he talks about a large container or umbrella, which may stimulate the resilience of a system. But what Massimo is calling us to do is something more individualized, more precise. When that system needs more precise information, problems begin. Hence the need for a good differential diagnosis, and hence the need then for a repertory like the Suggesta. I hope that's clear. And again, I can't say enough about, I always learned so much in doing these presentations. You can go back and watch a couple videos, review a book or an article, and you're sure to find a gem that's just right for you at this moment in your practice. Okay, so let's continue on with the second part of what makes Suggesta unique. And so we looked at the structure and the organization a bit. Let's look now at some of examples of the information. Okay, first of all, clinically confirmed information from Massimo's practice. All right, we know what the parameters are for that, right? The 4 to 5 years, the cases, blah, blah, blah. Updated language. We're going to look at that quite a bit. We've seen a little bit of that, but we're going to see even more. New rubrics reflecting modern practice. So we're going to look at several examples of those. And we've also seen, well, maybe not as much as we'd like yet, but I assure you, that was one of the first things I noticed when I really opened this thing up, is just how many cross-references there are. Show of hands, who wants to see the trick for taking the rubrics from the cross-references? Do you guys want one more little lesson on how to take cross-references? One person say yes, and I'll go for it. I'll leave it for the end. Okay. Let's dive further in. But if we get a chance,
I'll go
it.
Yeah, do it.
Well, okay, I'm going to go for it because it's like 2 seconds and it's super. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show it to you within the context of something that we're going to do right here. Okay, so we're going to kill a couple of birds. Well, we're going to get a couple birds with one hit in just a moment. Okay, so. Oh, when I was going over the new chapters, I failed to point out this chapter called illness. So information, new chapters. Here's another new chapter. This is his chapter called illness. or in other words, clinical diagnoses. And again, we just talked about how Massimo views the importance of a simillimum supporting the whole patient. He reminds us in many instances that we don't base a classical prescription purely on a clinical diagnosis. Nonetheless, again, these are categories, disease categories, and diagnoses that, again, he has treated and found to be responsive to certain remedies. So this is a chapter, a general chapter of diagnoses that affect the whole person, all systems. Let's take a look at where we are. Yeah, it's right here, just above age. So it's after generalities. Here's this new chapter on illness. So if you are looking for, and I'm going to use my function F3 to open up that window, if you have a case of Parkinson's, for example, here we go. Okay, your diagnoses are here, and these are cross-referenced with trembling and tension tremor. There we go. Okay, you see where we're going with this? Illness is a whole chapter where we have diagnostic categories that affect the entire person or the entire organism. We also have, if you recall, we have illnesses within the various organ systems or the individual organs. For example, the one I pulled here was stomach illnesses. Let's have a peek. So I'm going to go into, now here, I just use my F3 all the time, function F3, and now I use the delete or the backspace key to go back to stomach. Whoops, Marci, come on now. Stomach. Uh-oh. Oh, you know what? It's not stomach, is it? It's gastro. There it is. Stomach illness. And there are my diagnostic categories, if you will, my diagnoses that are specific to this particular organ. Okay, including complaints of stomach. Okay, and again, you see how well cross-referenced this whole thing is. So this is a big shift from it. A lot of it really does have to do with organization and where various symptoms are found. It's really, once you get in here and play around with it a little bit, you'll find that it's very well organized. Okay, so we have the new chapter called illness, plus the subsections in most of our organ systems. Now, we also have in most of our sections, and I've just got a couple of examples here, we have something called concomitants. So when I get into back and back stiffness, and this brings us to thinking about Boninghausen's organization, right? We're going to see a little bit more of this now in what I'm going to show you. So we have very often in any of our sections, this is in the back, the organ itself, if you will, or in the thorax, the cough. Again, it's concomitant. So it's not in back illness concomitant, but those are there. So we've got concomitants as a listing. We also have a listing for the location or the localization. Now, how do we find these if we're not sure and we're trying to orient ourselves in a new environment? Well, you'll never guess how I did it. I just went into my search and I said, again, I'm really only interested in Suggesta. I put localization. Let's just have a look. And if I do a search on the word localization, oh dear. In Suggesta, he's only got it 12,000 times. So maybe I want head because I've got, head pain situation going on. This again is a way for me to orient myself. And I notice right away that in head illness, I've got localizations and I can choose head pain localizations. Okay, there they are. Don't want to look at the remedies. I just want to see the structure of this thing. Okay, localizations in the head, bones, in the brain, etc., etc. Okay, you get the idea? Again, if you're not sure, know that you can look for, just search for the concomitants in a particular system and you'll have it all right there. We also have emotions. This one I really liked because, we don't really know where to look. The emotional component, like with anxiety, stomach, with anxiety, is it in the mind? Is it wherever? He's done a lot to organize that information for us. So again, I would encourage you to take, if you're interested in finding where those symptoms are, you can just go in the search and look for, in this case, what did I say? And oops, helps if you type it correctly. Emotion. And again, these are the, yeah, say I have stomach symptoms. There we go. Gastrointestinal, emotional, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that's been refined quite a bit. We also have the sensations have been refined and brought together under more refined headings, if you will, for each of the organ systems, as well as, and he makes a distinction here between sensation, which one could argue is a more objective symptom than the sensation as if. So he actually has sensation and then sensation metaphorical. Okay. As if, remember this one, opening and shutting, painless if the head is opening and shutting? That's a bit of a metaphorical or a sensation as if the head were opening and shutting, as opposed to sensation of the head being open. So all of these modalities, if you will, descriptors are available and organized. They're made part of the organization of this repertory. Now, let us move on to some of the new rubrics reflecting modern practice. And this is where I'll show you that bit about the cross references. Okay, so let's go to the repertory. Let's go to Massimo. And we do not have this symptom in our traditional repertories. Mind. Oops, what am I doing? I want to search over here. Mind. What? What is going on? I guess I'll have to do it this way. Mind oppositional. Now, wouldn't we love to have this symptom available? Because how many patients do we have with this particular symptom, right? Mind oppositional. We rack our brains for which symptom shall I use to represent this idea in a patient when we only have synthesis, for example, available, or, God forbid we're using Murphy or Boricky or something like that, right? So here's the symptom with 112 remedies, and it also includes a great number of cross references. Again, I always encourage you to look at the cross references because you may find something that's even more useful. If you wanted to do something tricky, like take this rubric, mind oppositional, and all of the subrubrics, I'm sorry, all of the cross references into one giant rubric, there's a quick way to do that. So this is what I'm going to show you right here. So the hand is pointing to mind oppositional. That's the first rubric that is of interest, and all of its cross references here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top of my menu here, the top menu where it says take, and I'm going to choose take and specify the options, which actually is the function F6 key. And it's going to open up a window here that invites me to take a symptom in a specific way. So first of all, I go over here to the far right and it's giving me some clipboard options. I don't want to use clipboard 1 because I've already got something there. So I'm going to say, do it on clipboard 2. All right. And what I want to do is I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom where it says take also. So we're taking not just the rubric that the hand is pointing to, also the cross references. I could take them all individually. I could take them all in a group with all remedies, or I can combine them into one room. Let's try this first one. Okay, it's going to go onto clipboard 2. Let's see what we get. Yeah, it automatically went in there and it took not just mind oppositional, but it took all of the cross-referenced rubrics and threw them all into a pile here. Now, talk about over-representing a symptom. That's not good, right? So what I'm immediately going to do probably is I'm immediately going to select all of these and I'm going to turn them into some kind of a group or combine. I'm going to do this. You know, this is my usual sort of way of doing it. And now the system still thinks I have just one rubric, but it's taken everything in. There is another way to do this. Let's work with clipboard 4 since it's empty. Go there. Mind oppositional. Remember, it was take and specify the options. Let's do clipboard 4. And this time, with the cross references, take everything combined into one rubric with the common remedies. And what happened? Look how quick that did that. I now have, instead of the original symptom, mind oppositional with 112 remedies, I've now got a new combined rubric, if you will, that has all 249 remedies that are represented by this combination. I'll bet you if I checked, I'd have 249 remedies here. Okay, so that's that take and specify the options menu that we don't talk about a lot, but it's very useful. And particularly if you have got some cross references that you're interested in. Now, how did we get here? Because we were looking at new rubrics, mind oppositional. And, you know, I just wanted to point out, like, say I go to my Adonis, what am I going to use? Mind contrary? No, contrary, because I don't know what else to use. Okay, and I've got some similar cross references. I did a little work ahead of time. So on this clipboard right here, I have mind oppositional and I have mind contrary, just to compare these with the two different repertories. And you can see if I slide out here to the right that there's a lot of overlap. Okay, and then after the first 83, Massimo's got some different remedies in his oppositional group. And synthesis has different ones. Synthesis is always also, if you remember, going to include the families. So the compositae themselves are contrary, according, you see, because it's got the asterisk. For mind contrary, we have the silicas, the sulfur compounds, and so on. Okay, so that's just one example of new rubrics reflecting modern practice. Let's look at several more of these. Dependence and addiction. Wow. Don't we wish we had this? Now we do. Because as you know, we've had to use rubrics like morphinism, alcoholism. Massimo has gone to great effort to create new, useful, clinically useful symptoms here for us. Here's another one, orthorexia. Who even knows what this is? I had to go look it up. You know, the truth is this is probably characterizes a lot of our clients. Proposed eating disorder characterized by an excessive preoccupation with eating healthy food. Yeah, we have these people, right? Fastidious about food. You know, they come in with 10,000 supplements, all of that stuff. Orthorexia and cross references. Okay, really, really useful information. Panic attacks. How do we repertorize panic attacks? Well, now we can. Okay, because according to Massimo, and again, if you watch any of these videos where especially, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, the ones that introduce Suggesta, when he's talking here about the mind section, he talks about some of these things in more detail. It's fascinating. So where were we with the panic? Dependence, addiction, orthorexia, panic attacks. According to Massimo, a panic attack is not the same as fear. Right, it's not. Okay, so we have now to combine with our traditional repertories new clinically relevant symptoms. Here's another one, paranoia. That doesn't even exist. I took this screenshot out of the synthesis, kind of trying to give us an idea of where do we have to look if we want to characterize paranoia. But in Suggesta, we have not only a rubric for paranoia, we have a plethora of cross references that we can use. Okay? Fears and phobias. According to Massimo, again, that fear is a rational problem which exists in the presence of the object, as opposed to a phobia, which would be more an irrational problem. Look at the phobias. We've got so many phobias and they're cross-referenced. Let's have a look at that, actually. That's in the mind chapter, right? Whoops. Let's go to the proper book and mind phobias. There they are. Look at them. Now, each one of these is cross-referenced. Okay, so we have the specific phobia, spiders, arachnophobia, but then, now that's the other thing. You're going to learn, if it really matters, shall we call them the Latin name for the various phobias? And then they're going to be cross-referenced with similar rubrics. So again, we're just looking at the clinically relevant new symptoms in the mind chapter. We have victimhood, we have vindictive, and I see that we are right at an hour. We're almost like wrapping up. So let me ask you guys, are there any questions or things that you'd like to show me before, or ask me to show you before I launch into wrapping up? Okay. I hope you see the value of this fantastic, new, and useful repertory. I did discover, and I wanted to share this with you again. You can get a copy of the PDF of the handout that I'm going to make for today with these links, that Massimo has got some lectures on the reasoned use of the repertory. These are available to practitioners only. I couldn't even get in there without, making an account. But this might be something that you're interested in, particularly if you are interested in the new language that he's using and how he approaches his individualizing cases. So that's available. Yeah, if you don't have the repertory already, it's on at $300. If you've already got it, it is a no-brainer to spend $60 because the new one, again, with the English, and it has been entirely restructured. I really think this is a no-brainer for you. So that is what I have for you today. I'm Marci Mearns. I do this here with Radar Opus. I also do one-on-ones and small groups if you're interested in that kind of thing. And of course, you know where we are found at radaropus.us. If you have a question, a concern, if you're interested in purchasing an upgrade to the new version or any of the other upgrades that you might have questions about. So stay in touch, and I'm going to stop my share and see if there's anybody still left in the presentation.
We're still here.
Someone came. You're still here.
We're
and
still
we have
here.
someone new who wasn't here. Hi, Gina. Not to out you, but there you are. questions, comments, concerns?
No, it's great. I just have to kind of play around with it now and might get back to you with questions, but this was really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks you for being here. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Thanks, Gina. Thanks, Kim. Have lovely holidays, all of you. And any questions whatsoever, you can find me online and you know how to get a hold of Radar Opus. Again, reach out if you want to have a copy of this thing with those links. At least then you can just pop right over there. Okay?
Okay, thanks so much.
Very much.
Okay,
My
bye-bye.
pleasure. Take good care. Bye.